Do you have a good wasteland survival strategy?
Ooh. I'm gonna be real honest. I'm one of those people that believes like when the apocalypse comes, like I'm gonna like die very quickly, probably by accident. Like it's gonna be one of those like, hey, what's happening? Like open the door and then like, depending on the apocalypse type, if we're talking zombie just hits me. Quiet place, I'm too loud, the monster just hits me. Like it's a nuclear bomb drops right outside my house. Doesn't even matter if I say it. Like, so I assume I'm going to die pretty quickly.
Welcome to Context Club, the weekly podcast where we provide all of the continuity, clues, and context that you need to understand your favorite shows, video games, comic books, and movies even better. We're giving you all the details that we know. We're combining my knowledge with Mike's knowledge, and anything we don't know, we're kind of researching and packaging it up for you. This week, we're talking about Fallout. Welcome to another meeting of the minds here at Context Club. What's up, Mike Williams?
Good week, I'd say. We got we were talking about Silo last week, and this week we are talking about Fallout.
How are you feeling about it overall? With things like this, and like I guess like gaming and comic book and I guess nerd communities in general, when something hits a zeitgeist like the Fallout show has at this point, it's been out for a little less than a week, and people love it. It's critically acclaimed. Very high Rotten Tomatoes score. I think it was at a 98 the last time I looked. I think it's easy for people to be like, it can't be that good and kind of shun it and turn it off. And we talked last week about how I was skeptical. How are you feeling kind of about the reception and then your own personal reception, right? Like, how do you respond to that type of hype around something? And then how are you finding it in the realist sense, I guess?
I'd say it's very, very good. And part of the trick is that, so like last year we had The Last of Us, which was a great adaptation of the Last of Us games, but also The Last of Us is remarkably straightforward. So they just had to do it and it was done. Whereas Fallout is this very weird clash of like hyper-violence and like sad stories, but also this upbeat 50s aesthetic and black humor, like dark comedy.
Yeah.
And it all kind of works. Like they're not adapting a specific Fallout game, they're just adapting the concept of Fallout to a TV show, and I'm shocked that it works as well as it does.
Absolutely shocked. Yes.
And I think that's what feeds into the hype. The Last of Us is more of a straightforward. Halo stumbled. Even The Witcher was pretty straightforward until they started diverging more.
Yeah, that first season was great on The Witcher. Second season I liked too, but then, and they're losing Henry Cavill at some point, and it still seemed to be going off the rails. And in terms of, we're just like throwing out adaptations out there, like Castlevania was incredible, that Netflix animated series. You've also got stuff like Arcane, but even Fallout, like you're kind of getting to, I think, feels like it's on another level that we haven't seen before. Like the amount of references packaged in like every scene, and just the quick pace at which the world of Fallout is kind of acknowledged and we're allowed to exist there. And there doesn't have to be comments about it. They just say, this is how it is. Here's a stim pack. You stab yourself with it. It heals anything. We're moving on. Like it's 100 different other little nods like that where they just don't even stop. They just let it exist in the world and say, this is how the world works. Like, deal with it. And you're also doing that alongside Lucy, the main like protagonist of the show, who's almost like a stand-in for like the early like Fallout characters that you would play as in each of the games. Sorry if I cut you off. Like, go ahead and
Yeah,
finish,
and she fits in such a way that like she still carries that 50s sci-fi
oh yeah,
upbeat enthusiasm, like the okie dokie, and
love it.
like horrible stuff is happening, and she's still mostly like, she's just happy, like not happy, but still happy and helpful, and it's such a weird line, but they cover it so well, and I think that's also partially because they have 3 characters to work with who each bring a different flavor to it. Mm-hmm. So you have Lucy, who is the Vault Dweller, the character that the player normally takes control of in each of the Fallout games is always a Vault Dweller with the familiar blue and yellow jumpsuit. Lucy is the Vault Dweller for this story. And then there is also the Ghoul, who is the world-weary, has existed in this world and understands exactly how it works for a very long time. In fact, as the show goes on, you find out, from the very beginning, if it wasn't readily apparent, since the Ghoul shares an actor with a guy that appears in the opening moments of the Fallout show. And then there's Maximus, a character who is a part of the Brotherhood of Steel, who is I've heard him called Wasteland Himbo, which really fits in with his sort of vibe.
Sure.
And they allow you to play sort of different flavors of Fallout. Like Maximus is strong but not very smart. Lucy is upbeat and capable but a little naive. The Ghoul is capable and murderous.
And jaded. Yes, very jaded.
But jaded and broken.
Yeah.
And I think they all work very well, and it's honestly better than it has any right to be. Like, right from the opening, I'd say like 10 minutes, you're like, oh, okay, so we're telling a pretty solid story here. Like, this is going to take the world seriously, and then it just also does not at the same time.
Sure. Yeah, and that's a hard, especially with Fallout, and this is what I was kind of on about last week. It's like, how do you thread that needle between telling a story with stakes and characters that you care about, while also acknowledging like there's wild super mutants and giant cockroaches and all of this other stuff, and like the I guess the dark humor of it all too, right? So it's definitely incredible how they've landed that. I just pretty much just like bulk watched the whole season, and been looking at a lot of takes online and stuff. And I think the note about Maximus that's interesting is I've seen a lot of people, like in the Fallout games, there's usually 2 or 3 different factions, and you can choose to kind of fall into one of those factions to progress the main storyline at some point, where you kind of have to pick one. I think sometimes you can abstain but I'm not like, I think some you do have to kind of choose a path. And one of those paths is to like align yourself with the Brotherhood of Steel. And it's fun to see a lot of people in comments on different YouTube videos saying things like, oh, like, I feel like Maximus is like me. I played the Brotherhood of Steel faction just because I wanted that dope armor because it would make me more effective in the Wastelands. And Maximus is kind of like, hard or quote or whatever when they ask him why he joined the Brotherhood, is that he wants to just hurt the people who hurt him, right? Like, that's kind of his goal. And then he's kind of, he kind of takes, it seems like, at least at first, until he meets Lucy, the main protagonist of the show, that he's very wrapped up in the dogma of the Brotherhood of the Steel and their kind of beliefs and their kind of scripture, right? And even in that first episode, we kind of realize that probably Maximus feels like he owes something to the Brotherhood of Steel, who got him out of a bad sitch when he was very young. And that's, there's I think really strong imagery there where you see just this I mean, if you get rescued by one of these just cool as hell looking dudes in power armor as a child, like you're sold. Like that's it. That's all you really need to devote the rest of your life to. It's almost like a Mandalorian situation too, right? So yeah, Maximus is interesting as a character. Lucy is fantastic. I forget Ella's last name, the actress that portrays her, but just the delivery on the smiles and the okie dokies and the kind of like reacting to the absurdity of it all, like almost getting eaten by a gulper, which has like giant fingers in its mouth and that sort of thing. It's just so top notch in a way that, and it appreciates the source material, even in a way that I don't think The Last of Us does, because there's things in The Last of Us that they say and then never address ever again. Like that changed the world, right? Like there's the thing with and I won't focus too much on this because this is primarily we want to talk about Fallout and we want to fill you all in about lore in the Fallout games. But in The Last of Us show, they talk about how there's like creep, basically like Zerg creep on the ground from the infected. And if you step on that, then like the hive mind of the monsters in The Last of Us world will like detect that and see. And it's a plot point, a major plot point in the first episode. And they never have to worry about it again. It's like the thing that got swapped out for spores in the world of The Last of Us, which is very important in the games. You know, characters are constantly having to put on gas masks as they crash the areas. And like the reverence here in the Fallout show feels like everything fits. They've really done their homework. There is one instance where I think people have taken issue, and we'll talk about that later. But for the most part, you know, Radaway, Stimpaks, like Abraxo, brands that are in the game are represented here in full force, and they all connect together, and they're in the past, they're in the present. It's just so exciting to see all this stuff, man. And I just did not expect this at all. And I think a lot of people didn't. I think a lot of people expected this to be a cash grab. It's done by Amazon. People are upset with the Lord of the Rings series. People are upset with some of the other things Amazon Studios has worked on. But this is a winner. Like there's no two ways around it.
Yeah, and I mean it all comes across like the storytelling is quick and economical. Like you can tell exactly where we're supposed to be without necessarily them going into this is our putting up a card being like this is exactly where we are in what used to be the United States.
Sure.
And there's so much
that Santa Monica Pier is. Yeah.
And so yeah, like in the first episode, she leaves the vault, and we pan over, and bam, there is the pier, and the Ferris wheel, which most people who have been to California or something will know is the Santa Monica Pier, mm-hmm. which puts her vault directly right there on Santa Monica. Mm-hmm. So like. And they don't like say like, oh, boom, Santa Monica, 20, right. Whatever. They're just like, okay, we're in California. Most people will know immediately that this is California. And even in that scene, which they're just showing right there, bam, like that's LA. Like
it's a Hollywood Hills. Yeah.
So like we know exactly where we are. They don't exactly tell you per se, but they trust that if it really matters, you'll get it. Like it does trust the audience in a pretty good way, to the point that I think the thing that you were talking about is sort of a trust audience thing that the audience has taken a little bit too seriously. In terms of there is a sign that shows the fall of Sandy Springs as
Shady Sands, I think, yeah,
as 2277, which people are taking that to mean that it contradicts the plot of Fallout New Vegas, which is one of the more beloved stories, and I think that's one of those things like the Bethesda, I believe his title is design director, Emil Pagliarulo released a timeline of where exactly Fallout the show takes place. And you got it right there. The bombs drop in 2077. Fallout 76 is 2102. That takes place in West Virginia. Fallout 1 is 2161. Fallout Tactics 2197. Fallout 2 2241. Fallout 3 2277. Fallout New Vegas 2281. Fallout 4 2287. And the Fallout TV show is the furthest forward on the timeline. At 2296. So all of the events of the games have some sort of canon ending, but it doesn't matter because we're not really dealing with most of those.
And they're largely far apart, except for, I think, the first 2 Fallout games, which do take place in LA. At least the first one does, I'm pretty sure. Fallout 3 is near DC, right? And then there's New Vegas, which is Las Vegas. And then Fallout 4 is... Oh, gosh, where is Fallout 4?
I know part of it. Operation Anchorage is actually in Alaska, so
that's Fallout 3's DLC, though, isn't it? I think Operational Anchorage. Gosh, let me look at
Fallout 4 Boston?
Oh, yeah, let's look. We can do it right now on the air. But yeah, I think there are super fans pointing out, like, even this tweet right underneath of here is, well, this show is full of many inaccuracies, so either the show isn't canon or the games aren't. And people being upset that there's a reference in New Vegas basically to the fall of Shady Sands. That's made in that time, 2281, which is much before when it would have happened in the show, where there's basically in Shady Sands, there's and spoilers if you're not ready for this, it's minor, but there's a big crater in the ground where Shady Sands should be, but there's no year on the date at which I think there was.
There is so I believe the board says like 2277, which would put it concurrent to Fallout 3.
Mm-hmm.
So the timeline would be off if you take that as the events of New Vegas happen in are being referenced. Yeah, are being referenced there
in the past.
And the real answer probably, Bethesda believes it's canon, New Vegas is canon, so the best answer is to say that this information is not quite entirely on the level, or they are referring to something else. Mm-hmm. As in, the fall of Shady Sands is a different thing from the events in New Vegas and whatnot. So it is one of those, like, if you take it as one thing, even though it's just a thing on the board, and then, of course, the spoiler towards the end of the show. Mm-hmm. Is it actually ruining canon? Nah, just don't take it that seriously. It's a thing on the board. You're fine.
Yeah. I know there's a lot of people who might get, like, super fans who might get upset with that, but it's also, like, when you're following other fictions as well that have kind of inconsistencies in this way, I mean, like, there isn't, like, harsh timeline inconsistencies like in a Star Wars or some other long-running series. I mean, Marvel gets real messy because of the alternate dimensions of time travel and stuff. But it's like, the way I think of it is there are so many odds stacked against having a show that you want to be canon in the Fallout universe. Like, I feel like I'm willing to give a little bit of the benefit of the doubt. Maybe there's going to be some retconning that happens, or maybe it's already happened with, like, more specific things in the show that I, as kind of like, I've played a lot of Fallout games, but I don't really consider myself like a Fallout super fan per se. Or, like, I played 3, I played 4. I haven't played 76, but I played a ton of Shelter. And I've read a lot about Fallout 1 and 2 just out of general interest. And it's like, man, you got to give them some credit. This show is just punching at a weight that is so much higher than it could have, and than it should have, in terms of the rules of the world, and that being reflected like in this story, like with the characters, just like even benign actions and things. You've got, like, Brotherhood of Steel, that all in all looks pretty good. The weapons look spot on. Like, there's a junk jet, like, on a shelf at one point. Like, somebody uses one to shoot, like, a leg or something through somebody at some point. And, like, just that attention to detail and the way
the trash railgun is used.
Okay, yeah.
Like in the first episode, like,
yeah,
like I love that weapon, and they just throw it in there as a thing. Like, and if you're not paying attention, you will not even realize that it was a thing that happened.
So yeah, just some benefit of the doubt, I think, and give them some room to cook here is what I would say, because they've really created something special, in my opinion. And I think, like, I mean, you can hate on it if you want to, but I think you're kind of spinning your gears a little bit. If you're mad about this show, you're probably mad about, like, Fallout 3 onwards, you know? Like, you're probably mad about the resurgence of, like, a lot of these Fallout games.
Yeah, just look, 2077 in the timeline on the board is the fall of Shady Sands. That does not necessarily talk about the actual thing that happens in Fallout New Vegas without spoiling that either. Just let it go. It's fine. You don't need to be that serious about lore. They don't hate New Vegas. They still sell it. They enjoy New Vegas. Oh,
I've seen takes people saying... Yeah, I've seen takes of people saying, like, oh, Bethesda hates Fallout and they don't respect, like, the continuity or the games or the lore at all. And it's just like, you can't get this show with this show feels like a lot of people at the top, or at least in the writing process and in the design process and the prop making process. Like, it feels like everyone who touched this played these games and understands them. I mean, aside from the actors, because I don't know how you prove that, but, like, gosh, I just can't imagine having that take, watching this show and taking it all in. It's like, it's a really far out there take. And like, maybe that's just me, because I'm not like a huge super fan. And like, I read a lot of the like journal entries and stuff, and on the computer entries and stuff in the Fallout games. It's an immersive sim in a lot of ways. And like, I've read a lot of that stuff and feel like confident enough to say, like, this feels pretty good, guys. I don't know.
Yeah. It's fine. This is a very good show. Take it, enjoy it. In terms of like continuity, it's this hews so much closer to what Fallout is than, say, Halo. And even Halo, at the end of the day, whatever. It's an adaptation. It's fine. It is going to be okay, guys. You just, if it bothers you that much, just don't watch it. It's fine.
Yeah, that's always the choice, right? You can always not watch it. The thing for me with adaptations like Halo, it's like, well, that can exist over there, and the original Halo games and all that stuff still exists. If I want those stories and that canon to be kind of untouched by this other stuff, it can be. And I think what's really impressive with the Fallout show is it does do things with the Fallout canon. It does explain things on a level that I don't think you could miss in other Fallout games, like in the games themselves and the source material themselves. And like, I think that those elements are well played in the show. Like, and
they do a fairly large change to canon in the show. Like, this is, there is a plot point in the show that they go with, and it is like, okay, that makes logical sense. And also sort of changes slightly the view of like Fallout continuity and whatnot.
The entire world. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Yes. And it's a good one. And they did it in the show, which is, again, as far as Bethesda is concerned, a part of the ongoing Fallout timeline. And I mean, they're not going to touch a Fallout game anytime soon. If I had to guess, because they are generally the main Bethesda team is a one studio team. Yes. And they just finished Starfield, and they are working on Elder Scrolls. So they could have another team working on a next mainline Fallout, but more likely is the next Fallout is like a decade down the line.
Do you think they're kicking themselves for that? Do you think the show... So I've seen some tweets going around. And if you've been paying attention, and also I posted a video about this morning, but the show has, as we've seen with other franchises, boosted the interest in the games. So like per game, like Fallout 3, Fallout 4, and Fallout 76, they've all increased in the amount of concurrent players on Steam. Sometimes doubling, tripling, quadrupling. At this point, I think overall the amount of people playing Fallout games has quadrupled. I've also heard Emma Fife, who works at Fandom, they have a wiki. She said that Fallout right now is the most visited wiki, like, on average, probably hundreds of thousands of people per day visiting those sites, and that has increased by something like 500 to 600% or something like that. So people, it's a zeitgeist thing. It's like,
and the great thing about a good adaptation is that's what they do. People have forgotten that, like, Cyberpunk 2077 got the heat back partially with Phantom Liberty, but the real, like, kickoff and reevaluation of Cyberpunk 2077 happened after the release of Cyberpunk Edgerunners on Netflix, which, if you haven't seen it, it's a fantastic anime and a very good, enjoyable gateway into everything cyberpunk for the average person, which is always part of the fun of these adaptations. There are certain mediums and stories that people will not engage in, like One Piece. I didn't watch One Piece live action, but part of the thrust of things like One Piece or the ill-fated Cowboy Bebop or Halo or whatever is getting people who would not, say, play the games or read the comics or watch the anime or manga or whatever to get interested in the world and the story and the characters and perhaps come back to the other mediums that it came from. So, like, hey, Dune is another one. The Dune books have, when Dune Part 2 came out, Dune books went up the charts. Like, people started reading all of the other books. Like, I'm interested in this. Even though if this is not exactly the same as the original thing it's being adapted from, that excitement can carry back. And I do think Bethesda might be kicking themselves, but of course also you didn't know that it was going to be like that. And of course
maybe it's a stopgap, right? Because there's a huge sale on Steam right now. You can get Fallout New Vegas for like $3 or something, and it's like probably tons. That game was pretty much just dormant. It was dead. Nobody was really buying it, and now like probably hundreds of thousands of people, maybe thousands of people, let's say, are going to pick that up. And maybe also, that's like, gets you the decade or decade and a half to the next Fallout game. Maybe, I don't know.
Also, at this point, realize that Bethesda is owned by the huge conglomerate that is Microsoft.
Yeah.
And while Bethesda mainline proper is a one-game studio that spends years working on that one game, those properties can now be handed to many of the other Microsoft-owned adjacent studios, including, as everyone has brought up, Obsidian Entertainment, the developers of Fallout New Vegas.
Yes, who currently have like 3 games in the fire right now between Avowed, Grounded, and Outer Worlds?
Outer Worlds 2.
Yes.
So they have their own stuff to work on. Maybe they probably don't want to. But if Microsoft or Bethesda really wanted a Fallout on the shelves for Season 2 or Season 3 or whatever, they could do that.
Yeah, I mean, I could see a world where Outer Worlds 2 or something gets delayed while like somebody wants to spin up a Fallout game because of the success of this show. But also, I think the interest now, like there's probably not going to be a Fallout game by the time there's a Season 2. It's more likely that the thing I joke about is like, I think we'll see probably a Starfield show now before we'll see the release of another Fallout game. You know what I mean? It's like, it's easier to go this way and get people interested, but I don't think that works. I think if executives are thinking that like this is now the surefire way Like this Fallout show is almost like lightning in a bottle, right? And if executives are thinking, oh, we could just make a Starfield show to drum up interest in Starfield, I think that's a great misunderstanding about what's good about Fallout and what's good about the Fallout show specifically.
And these adaptations like do work when they land, but that doesn't mean that they all
Right.
always land. And it's surprising how many of them have come out that haven't had like a new thing on the game side. Like Castlevania has had its 3 seasons and Nocturne, so 4 seasons. And Konami has done nothing. Like they could have licensed Castlevania out to so many places to have something ready. Nothing. It worked out in CD Projekt Red's favor that Edge Runners, again, while you were gone, I was saying that Edge Runners was really the catalyst for the reevaluation of Cyberpunk 2077. It was Edge Runners and then it was Phantom Liberty. And both of those together sort of like, you brought it back. You did it, guys. Good job. And not most of the other ones, like Twisted Metal also. Twisted Metal got a second season. Like I
Still
personally
unbelievable.
don't know who watched it, but it was watched enough for Peacock to take another shot at it for a second season. And Sony has not touched Twisted Metal in a long time.
It sounded like they were gonna make a game, but it got canned. Like it sounded like there was a project that spun up, but I mean, maybe that's still in development. But I think the last thing I heard was like it's probably not.
Yeah, it's just wild, and really, probably in Fallout's case, and in Twisted Metal's case, and in Castlevania's case, the indie spiritual successor is probably your best way to go, and hope that you get something that really harkens back to those old properties just on a modern release.
When it comes to adaptations, do you want to rank? Like, I'm at the point, and this could be like recency bias, but for me, I feel like this is maybe the best video game adaptation that exists right now. Like, just point blank, I think it goes above and beyond a lot of other adaptations. But I could see that being just like the hype and the recency bias of having just watched the full thing and not letting it stew for too long. But there's a lot of reasons I feel that way. But do you have any you would put, what's your like Mount Rushmore, your top 3?
It's weird because I also really like Castlevania, and Castlevania is working, like the folks that were doing Castlevania are literally working with almost nothing. Like they are crafting this stuff from like, and like Super Mario Brothers, the movie was also like that same thing. Like, but that felt like very referential heavy. But they're also like crafting these from almost nothing. Like they're just whole cloth, and the same can probably be said of Fallout. Like they have the world and stuff, but the story is all new to the show itself.
Yeah. Yeah, I think in like Castlevania, you've got the kind of 2 generals of Dracula, and they have their whole own kind of split arcs that are happening simultaneously. Like there's like a lot of work being done, like a lot of heavy lifting being done there by other characters and stuff in the show, and narrative arcs that just weren't present in the games. Obviously, Castlevania has a ton of lore. But I mean, like, I think about like all of the Resident Evil level, like old Resident Evil level adaptations and stuff that it's just so far away from where we're at now with like Fallout and The Last of Us. Like these are really good benchmarks. I think The Last of Us is a pretty good show. Like as an adaptation of the game, I think it's also good. So maybe just on those merits, it's like top 3 for me. But for me, it's like, yeah, it's pretty much Fallout show. I think Castlevania is probably in the top 3. Like you said, that's a really good pull. And from there, it's kind of like, I don't know, maybe that like Silent Hill movie from forever ago. I know people claim Arcane, but that's another situation where there's a lot of kind of liberties being taken there with like League of Legends characters and kind of developing those stories. And now that they've like made a canon, right? Which kind of existed, I guess, in League of Legends, but they had to like string it together and thread the needle on different characters and things to put them all in the same place at the same time. So yeah, I don't know. Like Arcane is a great video game show. I guess I'd be hard pressed to find that third round. It's more of a debate for me of like, well, is it Mario? Is it something newer like that Sonic movie, that first one, or is it like, yeah, gosh, I don't know. Do you have a top three?
I mean, it's going to be Castlevania, Fallout, Last of Us.
Yeah. Okay. Yep.
Yeah. And Fallout, it's better written. But Castlevania, man, Castlevania got some hype moments.
And it goes that last episode, I think, of season 3 or the second, like the crescendo, the build of these 3 characters kind of off doing their own thing, and then when they finally reunite in that action sequence that just takes off is like the most like out of my couch like fist pumping moment like internally that I felt like watching a show in a very, very long time. And then Fallout doesn't really do that for me, but what it does is like it makes me go, holy hell, they really nailed it. Like every 30 seconds I'm like, holy hell, they really got this. They like understand it. So
yeah,
they did.
Yeah, and I mean they got some real good needle drops in there. And it's very well written. So like the thing I'm always worried about for Fallout. So this is from Jonathan Nolan, who did Westworld. Yes, he is related to Christopher Nolan. The problem with Westworld is it started off real strong and then it fell right off. And I'm so worried about Fallout. Like, I think they can nail it. But can they keep it going and can they finish it off? Because the ending is always the thing, isn't it? Game of Thrones still is super popular, as House of the Dragon has proved, but for a few years there, it was a real struggle because of that last season.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that at all. I think I have more faith in this just in that I feel like they can finish the arc with like Lucy or whatever if they paint themselves in a corner and start anew, like in a different vault, like so just like the Fallout games do, right? Like maybe you do 3 seasons of like Vault 31, 32, and 33, and then you just completely change location, and then you can have cameos from these old characters, right, who are going to move on with their careers and stuff, can show up, you know, at some point on someone else's adventure or whatever, where you just like move across the country. And something we haven't seen from Fallout is anything outside of the United States, right? There's a lot of room still where they have to go. And I thought a fun thing might be to like look at some of the lore and talk about like what's going on at some of these other vaults, but also, do we want to talk about the games at all? Do we want to run through what people might be missing if they've just watched the show and they want to kind of understand the kind of world of the games or the lore of the games better? Is there anything here to unpack, do you think?
Yeah, so like a lot of people probably like Fallout has this very retro future 50s style aesthetic. And the core of that, and it might not mentally make sense, isn't that the thing that happened in the 50s. So like if you see that the opening section of the episode, it really feels like the world is part of the 50s or 60s, but they have technology that didn't exactly exist then. No, what happened is that Fallout is a complete alternate reality and an alternate future. And in that world, as we saw in the timeline, the bombs dropped in 2077.
Right.
But the divergence was actually much earlier than that. And so the 2 major points of divergence is, one, the transistor, which was actually discovered. A lot of things will be like, oh, the transistor wasn't discovered, and instead vacuum tubes remained the big, like, key part of technology. No, the transistor was discovered. It was just discovered much later. So vacuum tube technology is still a very big part of them. And also for them, atomic fusion was discovered and became sort of a normal reality of their world. And so those are like the 2 big things that happened. And part of that, in addition, there was sort of a resource war over oil and other things. And there was a thing called the Sino-American War, which was a conflict between China and the United States, which began in 2066 over the lack of fuel. And then China attacked and occupied Alaska, which was the big part of Operation Anchorage, which was one of Fallout 4's DLCs.
Was that a Fallout 4 DLC? Man.
Was it? See, now you got me look.
Sorry. And what we're looking at now is Fallout 1, and this is posted by Metalgamer over on YouTube.
Fallout 3. It's a Fallout 3 DLC.
So yeah, Anchorage is a Fallout 3 one. I'm not super familiar with the Fallout 4 DLCs because I fell off. So I'm like, I know that one, so it's got to be 3. But yeah, you're right. And
so they basically, China attacks and occupies Alaska, and the United States and China are fighting it out. And then in 2077, as far as they are concerned in the plot and up until the show itself, it is believed that China begins bombing the United States from its nuclear submarines, which is the big conflict that moves everyone either into vaults or leaves them amongst the fallout to try to survive and move forward, which is where we get, mutants, ghouls, super mutants, rad roaches, all that jazz.
Yeah, and there's definitely some Fallout. They're still holding back, I think, a lot of cards. Like we hadn't... again, some light spoilers here. You get some nods to things like super mutants and Deathclaws, but you don't actually see them in the show. I thought it was going to be a Deathclaw in the cave, but like kudos to them for pulling in the reins on that one, being like, no, that's going to be, when you see one of those, it's going to be real trouble. And instead it was an abomination. It was, I forget what they call it in Fallout. It has a different word. I think it's a Chinese word for the bears, but I forget what it is. Like, it's not yokai, but it's something similar in the game. But like, and even in the show, you get to see like Brahmin and other like mutated animals and stuff. Brahmin are like the 2-headed cows. Like the new California Republic flag has a bear with 2 heads, but there isn't 2-headed bears in Fallout. But there is things there. And it's interesting. You've hit the main points of kind of the before plot, right, of these Fallout games. It just kind of doesn't... These are things you find in like newspaper clippings and stuff as you're exploring around in games like Fallout 3 and Fallout 4. It's never really addressed in the story, which generally is more concerned with like get the water chip to fix your water in your vault, or find your dad who just disappeared overnight, or find the person who like stole your kid, which is the plot of Fallout 4, I think. But yeah, like some of these are really interesting. So
most of your characters are vault related. Fallout 1, you're the Vault Dweller, which is the term I brought up for most of them. I think that's Vault 13. Fallout 3, you're also a Vault person. I want to say that's 101. I forget the Vault number for Fallout 4. And then Fallout 76 is Vault 76, of course.
Yeah,
and then the
Fallout
show
4 is 111. Yeah, and then go ahead.
And then the show is 33.
Yeah, 33, right. And yeah, so now we're looking at here, this is Fallout 2. This was posted by FirstPlays HD. And yeah, not bad for 1998, huh? Like the graphics on this. You got a raider here, it looks like, or maybe it's a type of ghoul.
Yeah, and I will say that they also added some interesting stuff for the show's vault. So in most of them, the vaults are separate. They're like not necessarily near each other. So
not at all. Yeah.
Yeah. So there are games where you will run across multiple vaults, but they're usually like very separated. In this one, Vaults 33, where our character comes from, and without going into spoilers, I will say Vault 32 is nearby, and there is another vault as well. But the idea is that these vaults trade people in order to prevent genetic issues, which is very logical, and it's an idea that I was like, oh wow, they never really covered that in the other ones, that would happen.
Sure.
But it's also many of the vaults are meant to be social experiments, either social or physical experiments of some sort, which is they put, however many, 200 people in one thing, and they have a vault overseer, and that overseer is meant to do a thing to the people of the vaults and see what happens. And this is part of the black comedy. Like, the logic of that, if you make the vaults to save humanity and then you screw them up, the logic there doesn't make sense. But Vault Tech and many of the other corporations involved are meant to be dark comedy reflections on corporations. So most of them are social experiments that end up usually with a lot of their vault dwellers dead.
Yeah, and I think, the games are cynical for a reason, right? Like they were made and published in an era where there is a certain amount of cynicism around like just corporate culture in general, and the rise of like big corporate entities and like capitalism kind of taking over everything, with companies like Coca-Cola and McDonald's and even Disney, like, which I don't think get like as aggressive until like a decade or two later from there. But there's definitely a cynical take in the first two Fallout games and Fallout 3, obviously, and onward, about like what these corporations are doing, well, their place in the world, exactly, and it's still kind of the same old stuff. Like, you need a Mr. Handy because Mr. Handy will make you happy. Like, you'll be the happiest person on earth. Like, you need Nuka-Cola because Nuka-Cola will solve your problems. Obviously, in the games, Nuka-Cola also has an adverse effect to to your health and your abilities and stuff, as well as like Vault Boys, like you can find around the world and collect, is like upgrades your special abilities and stuff. So, but there's like a lot of commentary there about it, and I think like games like Borderlands and stuff don't exist without that kind of commentary and that the cynicism that these early Fallout games kind of brought into the fold. So it's very cool to see them like in the show not only like follow it very, very keenly, but also like add to it and be like, no, this is like, with what we know now, this is probably how these corporations would probably interact and kind of what they would get up to. And yeah, the idea that every vault is different is really kind of fascinating. I've got the wiki here. If you want to, we can look at just a couple of these to get the idea of, and
sure.
Let's see. How well can you see this? Let me punch in a little bit here so we can see a little better. But you got your starting vaults here. So 13, 101, 111, but there's, on the fandom wiki, there's just a really nice chart here, and we can get even closer in there to see what's going on. But like, let's see, vaults
and you can see the section there with purpose. Those are usually the experiment of. So
yes,
a control vault is a vault that they do not screw up on purpose, and then the non-control vaults are the ones where they're like, let's try something and see what happens.
Let's find one here. Yeah, go ahead.
You can see them right there. Social experiment studying the effects of excessive gambling. Social experiment dividing inhabitants into rival blue and red sectors. Like,
let's see. Yep, genetically modified crops and fauna. There's here's 31 and 32. This has already been updated with all the show stuff, but there's some good ones in here. There's like eugenics program was used to breed young inhabitants into perfect soldiers. Let's see. There's one that I saw earlier that was like, it's just a vault with one dude in it, but they left a box of puppets in there. And like he goes crazy, like he gets split personality disorder based on whichever puppet.
Medical experiment with psychoactive drugs.
Oh, there you go.
Long-term cryogenic stasis on unwitting subjects. There's one right there with the virtual reality simulation controlled by the Overseer.
Yep,
And so,
you can visit that one in Fallout 3, and so you can see the effects of this. There's a quest line, and you can go there and see like what these companies are getting up to. But yeah, there's a bunch of unnumbered vaults, right? So people kind of trying to connect the dots on a lot of these stuff. But yeah, super interesting, I think. Well, let's take a look at Fallout 3.
And it's all tongue in cheek. Like, there is no real reason, if you are a corporation, to create a whole bunch of vaults and get rid of like half the populace and half of the remaining populace in stupid experiments. But
R&D, man, they gotta be the next big thing, right?
yeah. So, but that's Fallout for you, and that's part of that sort of dividing line of humor and taking the stuff real serious and whatnot.
Well, it's also about class too, right? Because they're selling in Fallout 4, the kind of intro of the game is about like, can you afford a spot in one of these vaults, right? And that's kind of the idea there of like, only people who have money are getting in. I feel this way about VR. It's like only people, especially early VR, like only people with money can buy this tech and experience it, which is like a whole another conversation set of problems. But yeah, like that is social commentary, right? Like, only the wealthy are going to be able to survive in these vaults, but you still need like people to run the vaults and stuff and keep them running. And you're going to have a management class, and then things get stratified even from there, even if you have like all of these wealthy people kind of thrown into one vault. So I guess in the corporation's mind, like, why not mess with these people? Why not, research them and study? But I think even in that instance, it leads to questions of like, well, who's collecting this data? Does it all just go so wrong? And, those are bigger questions in the Fallout universes, which sometimes get touched on and sometimes mostly don't, I would say. But if as that stuff gets potentially presented in the show, trying to avoid spoilers here, like where does it go, right? And I think that might be where we get into trouble, where it's like, well, how do we wrap this all up into 3 tight seasons or 2 tight seasons? And then,
there. And we'll see how they go. Like it's going to be interesting, and sort of this weird experiment and this satire and commentary on corporate stuff is sort of the difference between, say, Fallout and what we were talking about with Silo last week, where Silo is more concerned with at some point, the nitty-gritty of what's happening within the silo and how they are built to function in a way that allows people to stay underground in a long-term situation, in perpetuity in Silo. But
it's like
vaults.
Go ahead.
Yeah, whereas the vaults, are eventually meant to open, and then the chosen ones are supposed to reclaim the wasteland and reinstate the world as it is supposed to be. Which is also it doesn't work out for him.
Yeah, but I also just like realized this, that that's also all kind of premeditated and bolstered up by a version of America that never existed, right? Like a perfect utopian American society, and it's like and you're sitting in that vault with only the same kind of videos and things to watch, and it's all like corporate propaganda about like how great America is and like universal truths. And I think Lucy kind of, and most Fallout protagonists embodied like the wholesome kind of characteristics of the era of the 50s, like without acknowledging segregation and racism and all of these different social issues that like, as far as we can tell in the Fallout world, they don't really address, right? It's mostly more about like the retro futurism and people have kind of sorted things out, right? They're like, everybody gets along type of a situation. So yeah, it is really fascinating when you start. I guess that's what's great about Fallout, is it forces you to kind of want to scratch at the surface of like, well, how does all of this work? And whereas like, again, like you said with Silo, it's really focused on like the human condition and people's ability to survive given the worst odds, right? And Fallout is more interesting to be like, no, like humans are messed up and rich people suck, and these companies are gonna put the screws to you even after humanity is basically fallen, and they're still gonna try to get one over on you. to their own benefit, even if they don't exist anymore, which is just such a cynical take and wild.
Yeah. And I mean, it is what is Ghostface? Ghostface? What is Ghostface doing here? Anyways, yeah, there's a lot of commentary, but I think Fallout is more about the fun. It's more about the choices and some of the stuff that you can do with a world that is less grounded comparatively. And it helps also that Fallout has a lot of... I also went through and looked at some of the inspirations of Fallout, and it's pulling from a whole lot of different things. Partially, it's inspired by a 1953 anthology called Worlds of Tomorrow, which is an anthology with a bunch of different stories from relatively big-name sci-fi writers at the time. But there's also I Am Legend by Richard Matheson, which was published in 1954, which a lot of people will know only from the Will Smith movie of the same name. But also Omega Man, which was a Charlton Heston movie. No, wait, Vincent Price. One of the two. Back in the day. There's the comic Hard Boiled by Frank Miller and Jeff Darrow, which was also a future. That was published in 1990. Canticle for Lebowitz, which was published in 1959 by Walter Miller Jr. A Boy and His Dog.
Oh, man.
1969, published by written by Harlan Ellison. The Postman, which was published in 1985, written by David Brin, which a lot of people will know from the Kevin Costner movie of the same name. So that's some of the stories. And then Tim Kaine, who has his own channel out there where he talks about whatever he wants to talk about each week. But Tim Kaine is sort of the father of Fallout. He also stated that if you look at basically a lot of the major Hugo Award winners and nominees for the years that Fallout was in development, you'll see a lot of inspiration there too, because he was reading like just a lot of random sci-fi.
Yeah.
But then you also have things like films like Mad Max, which started in 1979. And then you had Mad Max 2 and Beyond Thunderdome by time Fallout was in development. You have The Forbidden Planet, 1956. In fact, if you look at the robots, the inspiration is so on the nose as to be comical. Then there's also a post-apocalyptic film, The City of Lost Children, which was released in 1995, which features Ron Perlman in it. And Ron Perlman, of course, a lot of people know as the voice of the War Never Changes, which comes at the very beginning of Fallout. So, yeah, they were pretty much just pulling from anything. And, yeah, like you see that's... Look. just outright thievery. And you know what? That's awesome.
I mean, it's a way to get your favorite things to live longer, right? Like, there's no world which like a sequel to Forbidden Planet gets made, I feel like. But, you can just rip this robot design and put it in your game. And I feel like games were largely being unwatched, right, for a long period there, where creators could kind of they were just stealing whole cloth from each other, making their own different games and taking IPs and putting them into games. And I think Fallout did this a little bit, even like in the Fallout 3 era, which we talked about last week. But there's, I think it was made in the 50s. There's a lot of, post like Godzilla and post like actual atomic weapons being dropped on Japan. There was a lot of atomic media, like movies about nuclear threats. I know people making fun of me about how I pronounce that word, but I don't know. It's just how I say it. I'm sorry. I can't help it. But specifically, there's a movie called Them, which is about just giant irradiated ants that are kind of terrorizing suburbia. And there's a side quest in Fallout 3 that is literally just about stopping giant radioactive ants from terrorizing a small settlement there. Yeah.
As part of that Worlds of Tomorrow anthology that I first mentioned, like a lot of Fallout is the view of the future from the 1950s and 60s. So not necessarily the 50s as the future, but the view that they saw of the future.
Yeah.
In the same way that, like what we see of the future is, I don't know, Murderbot Diaries and Star Trek.
Well, there's also like the retro 80s future that we get from the original Star Wars films, right? Of like where devices feel very analog, but we know now they'd have to be like wireless to be able to function. In Star Wars, there's a lot of wires and things hanging around still, powering different things and using for communication and stuff like that, which like, and huge monitors, like almost CRT style screens and stuff, which we know we're like past that now. And so, yeah, there's it's like, this is a retro 50s future in which we have like, there's other types of like, there's retro 70s future and retro 80s future. So, I guess it's interesting that they've managed to hang on to it for so long. And I feel like I almost got like burnt out on it in some ways, where it's just like, you have like the radio and like the desolate land and stuff. And every time a new Fallout game comes out and they've got that trailer, and it's like, man, I already did this for like hundreds of hours. Like how, like I almost want something different, like a new kind of setting. But this show, the Fallout show, has drawn me back in a way where I'm like, okay, maybe I should go play New Vegas. Like I should just spend a week or two just playing through New Vegas, and that's what I'm going to do. But I don't know. There's so many games and stuff to play, but the show makes me feel that way. And to see people putting together posts of like, what level is Lucy, given her adventure, like how much experience did she gain through all her actions? Did she do enough side quests and things like that? And how much is that parallel? And seeing that kind of stuff, people mapping the location of the vaults to like Google Earth and stuff, like all of these kind of side stories coming up is just, again, I think like you said, Mike, an indicator of how good of an adaptation this actually is. And that's what it should do. Like, it reminds me of like when you used to play Tony Hawk and you're like, oh, I want to go out and skate now because this game just rips so hard. But this is, a show of Fallout that kind of inspires you to play Fallout games. And like, I don't know, there's not really a better endorsement than that for this.
And they also, as you brought up there, people crunching how much experience she gained and whatnot. They released the main characters as part of Fallout Shelter, so you can actually, it was a Kotaku article, look at their special stats directly.
That's not good for me. I've picked up and put down Fallout Shelter probably like 2 or 3 times at this point. Let's go ahead and take a look at that article real quickly, which is in here.
I honestly think Maximus should be dumber.
You think so?
Oh, yeah. They have his intelligence at like 4. That should probably be like a 2.
Oh, 4 is kind of high. Yeah. But I don't know. Like, yeah, I guess intentions don't count for intelligence. Like, I feel like he's kind of a well-meaning, kind of a spirit trapped in as many I think people do get trapped in like a religious cult.
Yeah. And Lucy has her luck at like 7. I'd probably take a point out of strength and bump that up to like an 8.
Yeah, here we go. Yeah, you see her doing like jujitsu in the vault and stuff, but then I saw some commenters and stuff commenting different videos of like, well, once she gets into the real world, she just got rocked by Will Goggins' character in a fight, and yeah, that pretty much holds. Let's see, you got the ghoul at 5 strength, 6 perception, endurance 7, okay, charisma 7, intelligence 7. Look, yeah. Oh, they put in Majun too. Oh, okay. Yeah, that's fun. That's fun. Maybe I should play Fallout Shelter instead of... No. I should play Fallout 76 instead of Fallout Shelter. But I think Fallout Shelter is a kind of a fascinating game because you can actually take the role of an overseer where you're usually playing as kind of a cog in the machine, as a vault dweller that goes off on an adventure. It's kind of like base building simminess of Fallout Shelter is a lot of fun. I do think there was a report earlier, like they had cloned some other game that was very similar to build it off of. But yeah, that aside, I think Fallout Shelter is like a pretty good game.
I mean, they're still updating it, still getting stuff. I downloaded 76 in New Vegas, and I started 76, which I reviewed it back when it first came out, and I was just like, this is fun, but also I think I'm going to jump back to New Vegas, and so that's what I did. So I loaded up New Vegas,
and it's gotten a lot better. It's got like a couple different updates, and there's like adventuring in a different way now, where you like actually go into, like, if you send people out to the wastelands, you can actually control them as they kind of like raid. I don't remember if that didn't feel like it was there originally to me, or maybe I just hadn't played it enough at that point. But you can like control them and like raid bases and stuff, or like settlements and things. To collect loot and stuff like that. So there's like definitely, if you haven't played it in a while, there's reasons worth going back. It is kind of riddled with microtransactions now too, but you can completely avoid them. Like it's not necessary to participate in that to enjoy that game. Shout outs to Generikb for this Fallout 3 gameplay walkthrough.
Oh, it's probably Generikb.
Oh gosh, Generikb, thank you. I told you, man, pronunciations in videos, it'll get you. You can do your damnedest, but you're always going to miss one. But yeah, I think that's pretty much everything we have on Fallout for today. Anything else you wanted to add? Do you want to weigh in on the bulk release of the entire season versus weekly episodic releases discourse at all before we go?
Yeah, I mean, it's got a lot of heat, but I mean, at the same time, you look at something like X-Men 97, which has been able to sort of build and keep the hype going over each episode coming out. Whereas,
not me, man. That last episode was good, but that is a Gambit episode for sure. Like, you're doing my boy Wolverine dirty right now for like 4 or 5 episodes. I got to see something. We got to get some Wolverine love here pretty soon.
I mean, you're getting an entire live action movie.
True.
You got Deadpool, but we'll be able to see X-Men 97 is riding high, and then Fallout spikes real strong, and then it'll probably, Fallout will dip off in like another 2 weeks or so. Just because everyone will be able to watch the entire thing pretty quickly. Mm-hmm. I haven't finished it, but you finished the entire thing in time, and it came out Wednesday?
Yeah, last Wednesday night, maybe midnight East Coast, so like it was 9 for me. So that made it easier. And yeah, I got through it before the weekend, which is wild. And like, I do enjoy that experience because it allows you to kind of take in the whole narrative arc. And I understand the value in being able to like see an episode and sit with it for a week. I think that sometimes that's not great though. Like if you have a weaker episode, you just think about a week or maybe not even that long of how much you weren't into that particular episode or something. Like there's a chance to lose you, I feel like. Whereas with the bulk watch, it's like, here it is. This is the thing you can kind of, from a critic perspective, it's great, I feel like, because you can just really kind of take it all in and you get the gist of the whole thing together. It's like listening to like a music album in one sitting, right? You kind of get the creative process and you understand the narrative workings there without having to think too much and without getting spoiled also on the internet from people just like posting, which I guess that goes 2 ways, because if a lot of people have seen the full thing, they could post spoilers for like the last episode or something like that. So I'm kind of split on it. I kind of don't really care. Like, I don't particularly care for the weekly releases sometimes because it feels like I'm being strung along. But also I like having something to look forward to. So I could go either way, honestly. With X-Men, I'm kind of trolling. Like, I've really been enjoying my time with it. But like, I love X-Men more than Fallout as a franchise, but the Fallout series was a lot more exciting kind of for me to watch than like a singular episode of X-Men where like, I don't know, like Nightcrawler is one of my favorite characters and getting to see him kind of show up in an episode is great. But it's like, if we're not getting a lot of that, it's kind of like, okay. like, I guess I don't really know at this point what I'm kind of kind of allude like which I prefer. Do you have a preference between weekly and bulk release?
I mean, I prefer weekly just because you get the chance to marinate with it, and you get the excitement of
Water cooler conversation, maybe.
Yeah, being able to discuss and talk about it, and you get that hype of like, what's going to happen next? Like in X-Men, you're like, all right, wow, they just did, E is for extinction. What's the next story that they're gonna like burn through so quickly? Just like I don't know, like where are we going with this? Like they did Inferno over the course of like half an episode, and that was like a whole crossover in the comics. So like there's always like what are they going to adapt, how are they going to adapt it, and you also get the ongoing teasers, like you got the last teaser trailer they released that showed like Captain America's shield, and so you get like until you actually get the payoff for that imagery, you get that excitement, and you get to talk to people like, oh, what's going to happen?
I don't know, man. Like I'm a little more cynical, and I'm like, this marketing nonsense.
I'm very big on not only episodic releases. I feel with the streaming era, we've lost a little bit of the episodic releases. We've lost some of the magic of shows with more than 10 to 13 episodes, like 22 episode seasons, because the trick with the 22 episode season is not every episode is going to be about the A plot. When you get like 8 to 10 episodes, every episode has to be about the thing that season is about.
Yeah.
Whereas with like 22 episodes, you can have episodes where you just sort of, futz around. You can have bottle episodes where it's just like 2 or 3 people of the cast in one area. And you can have some like more interesting episodes. Like a lot of, like if you look back towards some old TV like Supernatural or TNG or something, like a lot of the best episodes are some of those weird one-offs, because since you have the space to just do whatever, you can, and you can take that swing. And it's not always going to work. They're not always going to be great episodes. Hell, some of them might not even be good episodes. But they get to try stuff.
They get to risk. Yeah, take those risks. Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that works. And also, we used to be a civilized nation. We used to have seasons where the next season would release the next year.
Yeah.
And now shows like seasons are like 2-3 years apart. Like I don't know, man. I just make the show every year. Just make the show every year.
I think there's a lot of factors going on with that, as well as like getting through COVID quarantine and stuff like that, playing into that. But even without that, things get weird with streaming, and the metrics they use for success, once you're not looking at a return on investment in terms of ad revenue, like for television and box office sales for movies, things get really, really weird with the numbers game, where you can kind of interpret that data how you want. And from what we've kind of heard, and I'm not sure like how tapped in you are, I know you pay attention a lot to like reception and shows and numbers and things like that. But like in terms of what these companies are looking for, in terms of like what allows them to decide to greenlight like another season of something, is beyond us, right? Like it's kind of obfuscated now, where it's like the last thing I heard was like, oh, Netflix wants to see people binging these entire seasons of things like really quickly within a 24-hour period. And that's like one of the new metrics, right? And if they don't get so much viewership within the first week, then it's like this thing is pretty much dead, and that's why they can it. And then like some of that is maybe reaching, and some of that is people trying to figure out like why Netflix would just randomly cancel some of the franchises and stuff that they spun up, or not greenlight for like new seasons and stuff. And same thing with like Disney Plus, and really like Warner is just out there, and Max is just out there just killing stuff. maybe not even using those data sets, right, to figure out what to do. But I do feel like we got X-Men 97 because of the streaming era, right? Because they had the data and they're like, whoa, a lot of people are watching this old X-Men show and maybe we should bring it back because it's going to be a big deal, right? Like, and that kind of thing, I don't think you would ever, like that might have never existed in a broadcast era. But that said, I don't think we see a Star Trek Next Generation ever again, right? Like, I don't think we see a long-running series like that. And maybe something like a Walking Dead got close, but that started in a broadcast era and moved to streaming. It bridged the gap. And again, I don't know if we see a long-running series like that maybe ever again because of the trigger finger on these executives who are just like, well, that didn't quite hit the viewership or the engagement numbers we were looking for. Just kill it. It's not going to make,
Yeah, and I mean, it used to be back in the day, like, yes, there were shows that really, really nailed it in their first season, but a lot of our TV shows back in the day, like the first season is real uneven. And then when they moved to season 2, that's when they, cut characters, cut premises that don't work, add new characters. Like season 2 is when a lot of our series that are well beloved, like really hit their stride.
Yeah.
Because you need to be able to throw something out there, see what of it works, and then cut and add as needed.
Yeah, I think about something, when you bring that up, I think about something like The Office, right? Which probably took like multiple seasons before people... I feel like it had kind of a following early on, but I think it wasn't until like season 3 when it was like must-watch television kind of a deal. And some of that sitcom-y stuff. But yeah. All right. Anything else to add about Fallout before we peel on out of here?
No. Fallout is on sale on Steam. So if you watch the show, it's on Amazon Prime Video. You probably got Prime Video. Everyone pays for Prime anyways.
A Vault-Tec of our very own here. Yeah.
Watch the show. If you like it, go play the games. Like I said, they're all real cheap on Steam. I think New Vegas Ultimate Edition is like $5 or something like that.
Yep, $55 for the whole collection, I think it was last time I looked. So it's like every Fallout game and associated DLC, I think. And the VR version of Fallout 4 was like $15, and Fallout 4 proper was only like $5 or something. So a lot of wild math going on over there at Steam as usual. But I think I'm gonna buy that collection on principle. I think I might even own some of those games already. But yeah. All right, man. Let's call it for today. I think we've gone a little over. That's okay. We like talking about this stuff. And if you like hearing us talk about this stuff, go ahead and check back in with us next week. And we'll be right here. I am at Darth Burrito on Twitter and Blue Sky. Mike Williams, you are Automatic Zen on Twitter, and MH Williams on Blue Sky. You can follow us there if you're looking for more takes or just meandering thoughts about our favorite mediums. But yeah, that's it for this week. We'll see you next week.
I'd say probably your best survival strategy is to find a military base, because at least those people theoretically are trained to shoot things. So, they already got fences and everything. They're all ready to go.
You would think, except for in all of the video games and shows ever, the military bases are always completely destroyed, I feel like. Overrun, something goes wrong from the inside out, and yeah, I don't know. I mean, with my luck, I'm sure I would survive, but some terrible way.
Yeah. I mean, is surviving better or worse? What we're going to talk about this week definitely makes the case that it might be worse.